Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Muar MP and former Bersatu Youth Chief Syed Saddiq Abdul Rahman earlier today pleaded not guilty to 2 charges of misappropriating party funds. The former Youth and Sports Minister had claimed trial and he also claimed the charges that were brought against him as, quote, politically motivated. He also claimed that other politicians are similarly being threatened by the Kuttan national government. So let's begin the show tonight by taking a closer look at the charges. We have lawyer news Sin Yew on the line with us now. Sin Yew, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight. Now, looking at these 2 charges, the 2 charges that were brought against Syed Saddiq, the first charge of misappropriating 1 million ringgit belonging to Bersatu on the 6th of March last year, and the second charge accusing him of dishonestly misappropriating 120,000 ringgit of funds for the 14th general elections, this between the 8th and the 21st of April on 2018. In your opinion, Sin Yew, will this be a difficult case to prosecute? I mean, what does the prosecution have to provide in terms of proof to make its case?
I want to start off by saying that the presumption of innocence is something that's very important, and it is the golden thread that runs through our criminal justice system. So the burden is always on the prosecution to prove that Syed Saddiq is guilty as charged instead of him proving that he was innocent. And I want to emphasize that because it is important for our understanding of the due process that will take place. And that is the same standard for everyone, regardless of personality. Now, to answer your question, there is very little information to go on at this juncture except for the charge, the wording of the charge itself. So I'm going to comment in very general terms. The first charge is for criminal breach of trust. And for this, based on the charge, the prosecution will have to prove that, number one, he was entrusted with the funds of MUDA. Number 2, he had withdrawn RM1 million in cash. And the prosecution would have to show that the check was signed by him and cashed out by him and not by anyone else. And number 3, the withdrawal of this 1 million in cash was dishonest. And the reason why the prosecution is saying it's dishonest, it seems to be that it was made without prior approval of Bersatu's Supreme Council. So this means that the prosecution needs to show that the prior approval was indeed required. And if it was not required, then there was no dishonesty. Now, the second charge is for dishonest misappropriation of property of 120,000 being election campaign funds for GE14. It's more weight than the first charge. But for this charge, the prosecution will have to prove that, firstly, there was no appropriation of the 120,000. It must be Syed Saddiq who had appropriated the sum and not anyone else. And number 2, the appropriation is dishonest, that Syed Saddiq was not acting in good faith in the belief that those funds, he had the right or he had the authority to use those funds. I don't think it is that complex a case to prosecute because cases of criminal breach of trust and misappropriation of dishonest misappropriation of property is something quite common that we see in courts. So I hope that answers the question.
Right. So, Sin Yew, does it matter what the end goal of the use of that money is, or the intention or motivations of the person charged? Or is it simply a question of the paper trail that shows money left one bank account and went to another bank account in the name of the person charged?
Intention is very important, but the question is, what intention? So the intention behind the appropriation of sums, if appropriation can be proven, will be crucial during the trial. When I say intention, I don't mean the purpose which he had used the money for, but rather whether Saddiq acted under the genuine belief that he was entitled to use those funds. He may have used those funds for a charitable purpose, but ultimately that is not the test. The ultimate use of the money could be entirely benevolent, but if he knew that he did not have the authority to use those funds, then he would still be committing an offense.
Sin Yew, can I ask you about the timing of the order to charge or order to prosecute? Apparently it was on the 4th of August of 2020 last year. So about a year has elapsed between the time of the investigation and the order to charge or order to prosecute and then the actual charge. I'm just wondering whether that's typical.
For common cases, yes. We normally see a delay between the investigations being completed and having actually been charged in court. So to a certain extent, it is quite common. But this is a case of public interest. If there has been an order to charge, like I said, it means that the investigation is completed, and major cases like this, it should always be acted on expeditiously. So I do think that it is a cause of concern at the governance level, because the timing of the charge, it relates to, or it could have bearing to Saddiq's re-election campaign if he chooses to run in GE15. So at the governance level, the authorities should probably explain why there is such a delay. But for the purposes of the criminal trial itself, it is not relevant.
Sin Yew, what about the defense then? I mean, is the defense role merely to refute what the prosecution says, or is there something else that they might have to do in order to secure a release for Syed Saddiq?
Well, even though the burden is on the prosecution to prove that Saddiq is guilty, like I mentioned earlier, it's important for the defense to put forward Saddiq's case when the prosecution presents their case. It's hard to comment at this stage, but I would think that it is important for Saddiq to provide an explanation during the prosecution's case on whether the monies were appropriated by him or someone else, and what was the intention when he had, if he had appropriated such funds. And I think he had done to a certain extent during Facebook Live earlier.
Right, yes, and on that note of the Facebook Live, so Syed Saddiq was on social media just about an hour or so ago addressing the facts of the case even before the case goes to court. I'm just wondering, Sin Yew, I mean, while this seemed to be a move in terms of transparency and addressing issues around the case, are there legal considerations that come into play?
Well, the only issue is that it might be used against him at trial if and when he testifies. But that's at a much later stage, because that's during the defense stage. We have to go through the prosecution's case first, and the prosecution would have to prove a prima facie case against him before Saddiq's defense is called. If Saddiq's defense is not called and the prosecution fails to prove a prima facie case, then he would be acquitted and discharged without having to say anything at all.
So what about?
Yes.
No. So go ahead, Melisa.
All right. No, I just wanted to follow up very quickly, Sin Yew, on the issue of timing, because I'm just wondering what impact a case like this would have on the political career of Saddiq. If there is a conviction, if it's followed by appeals, how long is this likely to drag out, and whether it would have any impact on him standing for elections if an appeal process has not been exhausted?
Okay, it's 2021 and we are in the second half of 2021. Election is probably in 2023. If he gets convicted, then the situation changes. And I think the biggest problem with him being convicted, bearing in mind it's 2 years before GE15, is that he will be disqualified from contesting in GE15. And there might not be enough time for his appeal. Of course, he won't lose his seat if he's convicted until he exhausts all appeals. But once Parliament dissolves and GE15 is called, he is disqualified from being a candidate. And that is really the same situation with Najib, I think. So there is a bearing, and the timing it's a problem, I would think, politically. Not legally, though, politically.
Right. That was lawyer Sin Yew speaking to us. Now we're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but after this we'll speak to an anti-graft activist for her thoughts on these recent developments. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Maka lebih sukar untuk COVID menjangkit kita. Untuk tempoh 2 minggu ni duduk di rumah. Kalau kita boleh laksanakan PKP Kendiri dan keluarga,
saya kira insya-Allah kita boleh berjaya. Akhirnya kita menang.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir. Dalam kita berusaha memutuskan rantaian wabak ini, kita jangan terpedaya dengan virus maklumat palsu. Simak fakta melalui www.astroawani.com atau aplikasi Astro Awani. Teruskan berdisiplin, ratakan lengkungan pandemik ini.
The third wave of COVID-19 has taken us by storm. There's no room to take anything lightly. Everyone must follow all the steps to stop the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing, face mask, follow these steps, this SOP with the utmost discipline. Together, we can flatten the curve.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro Awani sekarang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku kat atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting.
Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa. Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Former Youth and Sports Minister Syed Saddiq has countered that the 2 charges of misappropriating party funds that were brought against him was, quote, politically motivated. Now, he claimed that other MPs from both sides of the political divide are also being targeted for corruption investigations by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, or MACC. Let's speak now to an anti-graft activist and get her thoughts. Cynthia Gabriel is the Executive Director of the Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, or better known as the C4 Centre. Cynthia, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight. Let's talk about these allegations of political conspiracies and manipulation of the criminal justice system. All of that is not new, Cynthia, and we have many politicians from both sides of the political divide having alleged that corruption charges against them are politically motivated. I'm just wondering, when the public is weighing these matters, what are the things that we have to keep in mind?
Yes, hi Melissa. Thank you for having me on the show. Well, today's trial of Syed Saddiq actually tells us a number of things. I wanted to raise 3 very specific points. One of it is what we've seen so far, which is the high-profile trials of political leaders on trial. And this is not something really new or shocking, but it's something very disturbing. And disturbing because it's happening across the political aisle. It's happening to politicians which are very much experienced in the system, as well as the new ones, as you can see with Syed Saddiq. But the heart of the matter is this. There is a lack of mechanism in actually regulating political financing, and a lack of clarity as to what actually constitutes political donations. So in the course of the last 1 week alone, we've had 2 trials. The first one, the trial of Tengku Adnan, in which the court actually ruled that it was the 2 million was actually political donations meant for the 2 by-elections in 2016. And today, Syed Saddiq was actually tried and charged for misappropriation of funds under the CBT, criminal breach of trust, as well as for misappropriation of 120,000 for political party funds. Now, this is something which is occurring, and it shows the seriousness of what we're facing today. And that is that money is running through the political system in a way which is so uncontrolled, so unbridled, and so much in need for a mechanism of check and balance and accountability. And
Cynthia, if I can ask you, if I can just jump in there, Syed Saddiq pretty much makes the same argument in his, very recent Facebook address to both supporters and people who voted him in. But the question, I think, when we're looking at the specific charges, is that he makes, and I wonder how do we take that? I'm sure people who support him, some of them might think, yes, there is a political conspiracy, but is it easy to prove political conspiracy? What do you have to actually suggest about, the MACC, its integrity, about all the various mechanisms, that need to be involved in a political conspiracy? What do you make of that, allegation that he's made?
Well, I'm certainly not surprised that politicians are using this reasoning that it is politically motivated, and it very well could be, but it needs to be proven. And I think it just goes back repeatedly to actually question the independence of the institutions before us and the deepening trust deficit that many of the people actually have today with the institutions before us. And the two institutions that we want to actually address in this situation like this is not just the MACC, because the MACC is not the agency that prosecutes. It's not. It is an investigative body. The real agency that prosecutes is actually the Attorney General's chambers. And for a very long time, civil society have also called for a separation of powers between the Attorney General and the role of the public prosecutor. So in this regard, of course, there were some questions raised about MACC actually recommending for some action to be taken back in January. But it's only now that the Attorney General had decided to press charges. So there are many questions in this regard about the independence of MACC and the importance of the separation of powers between the Attorney General and the public prosecutor. But without these two institutional independence issues being addressed, we'll continue to have both sides of the political divide actually blaming the political system and political interference as a way to use MACC as a tool. And this actually needs to be rectified as soon as possible, urgently, because Syed Saddiq's case will not be the last one. There are going to be many other politicians who will be playing with funds because the general elections is coming. And we don't have enough mechanisms for checks and balance and independent institutions to actually ensure that accountability is a big factor in the coming election.
All right, very, very quickly, can I just ask you, Cynthia, you mentioned a little bit about the recent Tengku Adnan case, and in that case, you see the person offering an alleged bribe convicted and the recipient of the money then set free. And I'm just wondering whether that, in terms of administration of justice, that there's something there when it comes to the prosecution of corruption cases.
Yes. I mean, in the case of Tengku Adnan, he was actually found guilty, right? But the Court of Appeal had overthrown that decision and decided that it was actually political donations. And so because it was political donations, so it wasn't corruption, because there was a receipt that was actually issued by UMNO to suggest that it was political donations to UMNO. But this does not make it right. And the money that is actually flowing through the political system needs to have much better clarity. And in actually saying that, I think what we really need is to also track the illicit enrichment of politicians and how they obtain funds and how they actually obtain money to win the elections and to run the elections. In fact, in the case of Najib and 1MDB, he had also admitted that 50 million ringgit of that 2.6 billion that had gone into his personal bank accounts was actually used to win the last GE13. So we're going on a merry-go-round, on a cycle, which actually very urgently calls for the political system and the business community to actually find ways to agree that they need to be more transparent, more accountable in the whole system of who is giving you the donation and what the donation is being used for.
Right. Cynthia Gabriel of the C4 Centre there. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We're going to take another quick break here and consider this more in just a few minutes. We'll be right back.
Maka lebih sukar untuk COVID menjangkit kita.
Untuk tempoh 2 minggu ini, duduk di rumah. Kalau kita boleh laksanakan KKP Kendiri dan keluarga,
saya kira insyaAllah kita boleh berjaya. Akhirnya kita menang.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir. Dalam kita berusaha memutuskan rantaian wabak ini, kita jangan terpedaya dengan virus maklumat palsu. Simak fakta melalui www.astroawani.com atau aplikasi Astro Awani. Teruskan berdisiplin, ratakan lengkungan pandemik ini.
The third wave of COVID-19 has taken us by storm. There's no room to take anything lightly. Everyone must follow all the steps to stop the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing, face mask, follow these steps, this SOP with the utmost discipline. Together, we can flatten the curve.
Kini berwajah
Hi, thanks for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. However, if you've just joined us on the show, tonight we're discussing the political ramifications of the charges of misappropriating funds against Syed Saddiq and his party, MUDA. So now let's speak to political analyst Dr Sharifah Syahirah, Syed Sheikh. Syahirah, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm just wondering what you think. What impact do you think the charges and the ensuing court case will have, not just on Syed Saddiq's political career, but also his personal charisma, taking into consideration the tremendous amount of goodwill that he had garnered from his work distributing COVID relief aid?
Hi, thank you, Astro Awani, for inviting me. Based on social media narratives, a lot of netizens consider this as another political drama. So when it is considered a political drama, it seems to be just like what Cynthia said just now. It's about trust deficit against the politician in Malaysia, and based on his case, it is very subjective and ambiguous because it's about political funding and about misappropriation of political finance. So it's something that is vague and unclear. And based on his live Facebook and Instagram, I mean, although he's not, he used to be a minister, former minister. Although he's not the current minister or holding any post, it seems to be like he does have a very huge influence. Again, politics is all about perception. So in his case, to what extent the perception is on his side or on the other politician's side.
Shaya, if I could ask you about that, because you just, like many of us, watched, Syed Saddiq on Facebook, or it could have been Instagram. I watched on Instagram. I think he has over 1 million followers on Instagram. And then a lot of comments were coming out, right? And so what is your sense of his delivery, his ability to persuade, the kind of comments that were coming out? What was the atmosphere like?
It's a mix between the supporters of Bersatu against him, and also there are also a lot of supporters from his maybe his party, from youth. We can see a mixture of reactions. But the thing is, for him to receive a very large viewer, for about 25,000 viewers for Instagram and Facebook, it actually shows certain amount of influence. And the thing about politics, as I mentioned, it's about influence, it's about perception. So to what extent who's who can show and can actually portray what kind of perception? Yes, politicians need to know and need to ensure their political survival. In this case, I mean, government or the opposition party. However, they also need to be in line with the rational and also the critical thinking of the rakyat, that the people are able to access to any information now, and due to our education system, due to our information policies, we are very open and we are able to analyze the situation independently. So my advice, I really hope that all politicians, please, although we are going for, you are going for political survival to actually ensure your strength in politics, make sure you are also looking at the survival of rakyat and perceived as a person who represents rakyat.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you on that, particularly during a time of crisis. This is a politician, Saddiq is a politician who has been working on the ground, delivering aid, and we see that on social media, and so his supporters see that. Even the most ambivalent of observers can see that. I'm just wondering, how this could reflect on the MACC or even the Attorney General's chambers or the Perikatan National Government. Could charging an opposition politician during a crisis backfire on the government?
But the thing is, we need to I believe, in the integrity of MACC and the government, especially the government officers, because at AG, and I'm sure that the trials and the whole process will be done in a very in a fair trial, and it's the perception, yes, but I think the perception is more against the politician instead of the government. Yeah.
Okay.
And finally, just a quick note on his tone. Do you think? What do you think of Syed Saddiq's strategy during the FB and Instagram talk? Speaking very frankly, saying that and looking at the facts and saying, "Oh, you can Google this yourself." Go ahead and Google when Bersatu was in fact temporarily banned, and therefore I couldn't have done this. Do you think that was a powerful strategy?
I think for him, because this is what he's been doing in terms of disputing all the COVID-AIDS and so forth, and this is his style. It works in certain for certain group of people, but it might not work for certain group of people. But the thing about to be a politician, this is one of the risks and challenge, I think, that any politician, especially those who say it out loud, they want to make some kind of political changes. Okay, so it's not easy to make change, and there will be hurdles and challenges. So we'll see how it goes, because we'll need time to actually analyze. For example, if I need to do a real forensic or intelligence analysis on social media, the comments and all those, I do need time. But so far, we have 50-50 when it comes to influence. Okay. As I mentioned, politics is all about perceptions. Yeah.
We'll check back in with you for that analysis, Dr. Syahirah. Thank you so much for your time. That was political analyst Dr. Sharifah Syahirah. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, signing off the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Good night.